A ship drifts silently, its crew vanished into thin air. We are exploring 25 of history's most debated paranormal events, a journey into the gray area where documented history collides with the unexplained. You will hear the full stories behind the world's greatest unsolved mysteries, from ghost ships and haunted battlefields to encounters that defy all logic. Why would 9 experienced hikers flee their tent into a frozen wilderness, and what force flattened 800 square miles of Siberian forest in an instant? What does it truly mean when the past refuses to stay buried? On a calm December afternoon in 1872, a vessel was spotted drifting aimlessly off the coast of Portugal. The ship was the Mary Celeste, and when the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded her, they stepped into a silence that has echoed for over a century. The ship was perfectly seaworthy, her sails partially set, with a 6-month supply of food and water in her hold. In the captain's cabin, breakfast things lay on the table, as if the meal had been abruptly abandoned. The crew's personal belongings, their pipes and sewing kits, even their boots, were all left precisely where they had been placed. Only the ship's lifeboat was missing, along with every single soul who had been on board. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of violence, and no logbook entry to hint at a reason for the sudden, complete evacuation. Official inquiries were launched, and countless theories have been proposed to solve this maritime riddle. Some pointed to pirate attacks, though nothing of value had been stolen. Others whispered of sea monsters or giant squids, despite a complete lack of any such evidence. More plausible explanations included a sudden waterspout or a fear that the alcohol cargo was about to explode, prompting a panicked but unnecessary abandonment. Perhaps there was a mutiny, though the captain's family was aboard, making that scenario less likely. The frustrating truth is that no single theory neatly accounts for every detail found on that deserted ship. Why would an experienced captain like Benjamin Briggs order everyone into a small lifeboat, severing their only sure connection to survival, unless he believed the ship itself was doomed? And why did the ship, which remained perfectly navigable, not sink? The mystery of the Mary Celeste left an indelible mark, transforming a simple merchant brig into the archetype of every ghost ship tale that followed. It is a story that lives in the empty spaces, in the half-finished meal and the abandoned child's toy. It asks us what could be so terrifying, so immediately threatening, that it would drive rational people to vanish into the open ocean, leaving behind the safety of their vessel and all their worldly possessions. This single, unresolved event continues to captivate because it represents a perfect, unsolvable equation of fear and reason, a blank page upon which we have projected our deepest anxieties about the sea for generations. Years after the Mary Celeste vanished into legend, another kind of mystery would unfold, not on the open sea, but within the cramped walls of an ordinary home. In August of 1977, in a North London council house, a single mother named Peggy Hodgson called the police in a state of sheer terror. She reported that furniture in her daughter's bedroom was moving on its own. When officers arrived, they were reportedly met with the sound of loud knocking from the walls and witnessed a chair slide across the floor with no one near it. This was the beginning of the Enfield Poltergeist, a case that would become one of the most documented and fiercely debated paranormal events in modern history. The phenomena quickly escalated beyond mere noises. Witnesses, including journalists and paranormal researchers, reported seeing heavy furniture like armchairs and beds shake and tilt. They described levitations, with one of the daughters, 11-year-old Janet, allegedly floating above her bed. The entity, which communicators claimed was a former resident who had died in the house, would speak through Janet in a gruff, guttural voice. The case attracted the attention of the Society for Psychical Research, whose investigators spent long periods in the house documenting the events. Even a renowned magician was brought in to look for signs of trickery. He left baffled, stating that while some incidents could have been faked by the children, others seemed to have no rational explanation. This is where the controversy truly took root. Skeptics pointed to later admissions from the daughters that they had faked some of the occurrences, like the voice and the knocking sounds, to see how far they could push the investigators. Yet this confession does not account for the sheer volume of testimony from outside, respected observers who swore they saw things they could not explain. How do we reconcile the hoaxed elements with the reports from police officers and journalists who had no stake in the story? The Enfield Poltergeist stands as a cornerstone of paranormal investigation precisely because it is not a simple ghost story. It represents the classic, messy battle between belief and skepticism, a case where the truth seems to be deliberately hidden behind a curtain of childish pranks and inexplicable phenomena. It forces us to ask whether a hoax can explain everything or if some genuine, unsettling force was at work, using the guise of a trick to hide in plain sight. A different kind of terror, one rooted in a tangible human tragedy, would soon grip the public imagination. In Amityville, New York, in November of 1974, a young man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. used a rifle to murder his entire family as they slept in their home. This terrible, real-world crime created a stain of violence that the following occupants would claim never faded. Just over a year later, the Lutz family purchased the house at a steep discount, aware of its grim history. They moved in during the cold December of 1975, but their stay lasted only 28 days. They fled, abandoning their home and nearly all their possessions, with a story of supernatural persecution that would become a modern legend. George and Kathy Lutz described a relentless campaign of psychic terror. They spoke of swarms of flies appearing in sealed rooms during the dead of winter. They claimed a foul, green slime would inexplicably ooze from the walls and keyholes. Perhaps the most chilling image they presented was that of a spectral entity they called Jody, a demonic pig-like creature with glowing red eyes that was glimpsed peering through the home's windows. Their account was a perfect storm of paranormal tropes, from disembodied voices and slamming doors to the physical manipulation of Kathy Lutz, who they said was levitated from her bed. The story exploded into a media frenzy, meticulously chronicled in a best-selling book that presented the events as fact. The subsequent film adaptations seared the image of the Dutch colonial house with its distinctive quarter-moon windows into the global consciousness, turning the Amityville horror into a cultural phenomenon and a blueprint for the haunted house genre. Yet, almost from the beginning, the foundation of the story was cracking under scrutiny. Skeptics, including previous occupants of the house, came forward to say they had experienced nothing unusual. Investigators pointed out glaring inconsistencies in the Lutz's timeline and descriptions. The family's own lawyer eventually stated he believed the entire account was a fabrication, an elaborate hoax concocted over bottles of wine to create a lucrative story. The debate rages to this day, a perfect conflict between belief and cynicism. Did the Lutz family genuinely experience a paranormal haunting so intense it drove them from their home, a haunting born from the residual energy of a horrific mass murder? Or were they clever opportunists who saw a chance for fame and fortune, weaving a terrifying tapestry of lies around a real-life tragedy? The power of the Amityville story lies not in proving which side is correct, but in its enduring ambiguity. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable question about the nature of fear itself. Can the sheer expectation of horror, the knowledge of a past atrocity, manifest a phantom reality so powerful it becomes indistinguishable from the truth? While a family fled their home in Amityville, a force of unimaginable power was unleashed in one of the most remote places on Earth. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, in a desolate part of Siberia near the Tunguska River, a man was sitting on the front porch of a trading post. He described seeing the sky split in two as a great blue light as bright as the sun came crashing down. The sight was followed by a shockwave of sound and heat so intense it knocked him from his chair and scorched his skin. What he witnessed was the largest impact event in recorded history, an explosion so powerful it instantly flattened over 800 square miles of pristine forest, snapping millions of trees like matchsticks and laying them out in a radial pattern of destruction. The force released was roughly 1,000 times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, yet for all its power, the event left no crater. The sheer scale of devastation combined with this crucial missing piece has fueled scientific debate and paranormal speculation for over a century. The leading scientific theory suggests the explosion was caused by the airburst of a stony asteroid or a comet roughly 200 feet in diameter. This object, the theory goes, entered Earth's atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles per hour, superheating the air around it until it detonated 3 to 6 miles above the ground. The resulting blast was a fireball of incinerating heat and a shockwave of unimaginable pressure that did all the damage, vaporizing the object before it could strike the Earth and leave a traditional crater. The remoteness of the region meant no formal expedition reached the site for nearly 20 years. When scientists finally arrived, they found the ground littered with microscopic silicate and magnetite spheres, evidence of a cosmic body's violent disintegration. They also documented stranger, more lingering effects. For nights after the explosion, skies across Europe and Asia were so brilliantly lit that people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. This was likely caused by vast amounts of ice dust from a comet's tail, or perhaps from forest particulates injected high into the atmosphere, scattering sunlight in a global, eerie twilight. Some studies even point to accelerated growth and genetic mutations in the local pine trees that later regrew, a possible effect of the intense radiation flash. But the lack of a smoking gun, that definitive impact crater, has kept the door wide open for more extraordinary explanations. Could it have been a chunk of antimatter from deep space, annihilated in a flash of pure energy upon contact with our normal matter? Some have even proposed the Earth was struck by a miniature black hole, a hypothetical object that would have passed straight through the planet, entering in Siberia and exiting somewhere in the Atlantic. While these ideas remain on the fringe of science, they persist because the standard model, for all its evidence, cannot answer every question with absolute certainty. The Tunguska event stands as a humbling reminder of our planet's vulnerability and the immense, unpredictable forces that exist beyond it. It is a mystery that lives in the space between a proven scientific hypothesis and the human need for a complete story. A colossal explosion whose true nature continues to echo through the silent, flattened forests of Siberia. While Siberia's forests lay flattened by an unseen cosmic force, a more personal and intelligent malice was taking root on an American farm. In the early 1800s, in the rural community of Adams, Tennessee, the Bell family became the focus of an entity so notorious its name would become legend. It began subtly, with unexplained knocking sounds on the walls and doors of their log cabin. Soon, the noises gave way to something far more sinister. The family reported the sounds of rats gnawing at the bedposts, of chains dragging across the floor, and invisible hands pulling the blankets from their beds as they tried to sleep. The phenomena quickly escalated from auditory terror to physical violence. The Bell children, particularly the youngest daughter Betsy, were slapped, pinched, and had their hair pulled by an unseen assailant. The entity seemed to possess a chilling intelligence, developing a distinct voice and a vindictive personality. It would sing hymns, quote scripture, and then spew venomous curses, directing most of its hatred toward the family patriarch, John Bell Sr. Its knowledge of distant events and its ability to mimic the voices of neighbors to lure family members into the woods demonstrated a cunning that went far beyond a simple ghost. The torment reached its tragic climax when John Bell Sr. fell into a series of debilitating spells, lapsing into unconsciousness and experiencing facial paralysis. The entity itself boasted that it was poisoning him. Indeed, when a mysterious vial of dark liquid was found, a family cat that lapped up a few drops instantly died. Soon after, John Bell was found in a coma, and upon his death, a small bottle of the same black substance was discovered, with the witch claiming credit for his murder. What makes the Bell Witch case unique in the annals of the paranormal is its very public nature. This was not a private haunting confined to a single family. Neighbors and curiosity seekers flocked to the farm, many of them experiencing the phenomena firsthand. The entity's reputation grew so large that it reportedly attracted the attention of the future president, Andrew Jackson. The tough old general and his men, so the story goes, were traveling to the Bell farm when their wagon suddenly stopped dead. After the wheels were inexplicably freed, Jackson allegedly declared, "By the Eternal, I never saw anything like this before." Upon arriving, one of his companions, a man who claimed to be a witch hunter, was supposedly rendered helpless by the entity, which then focused its torment on him until Jackson and his party were driven from the property. This account, whether fully factual or embellished by time, cemented the Bell Witch's place in American folklore. The case blurs the line between legend and history because it is not just a campfire story. It is supported by sworn affidavits from neighbors and the detailed account of Richard Williams Bell, a son who wrote his memoir decades later. These first-hand testimonies, passed down through generations, provide a framework of specific events, names, and dates that give the story a weight often lacking in other tales. The debate continues because the Bell Witch represents something more complex than a simple ghost. It was an interactive, intelligent, and cruel presence that engaged with an entire community, leaving a paper trail of witness accounts that challenges easy dismissal. Was it a mass hallucination born from frontier superstition? A complex series of poltergeist phenomena focused on the adolescent Betsy Bell? Or was it, as the legend insists, the vengeful spirit of a wronged neighbor named Kate Betz? The story endures because it forces us to confront the possibility of a consciousness that survives death, one capable of holding a grudge and acting upon it with terrifying purpose. From the vengeful intelligence of the Bell Witch, we move to a tale of technological terror born in the shadow of World War. The story of the Philadelphia experiment suggests that the quest for a military advantage can lead to consequences far stranger than any ghost. According to the legend, in October of 1943, the United States Navy conducted a top-secret experiment aboard the USS Eldridge, a destroyer escort docked in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The goal was allegedly to make the ship invisible to enemy radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. But the experiment, the story goes, succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Witnesses reportedly saw a greenish fog envelop the Eldridge, after which the entire ship and everyone on it vanished from sight. It was not just cloaked, it was physically gone from the Philadelphia harbor. Moments later, it was said to have materialized hundreds of miles away at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, before blinking back into existence at its original location. The human cost of this supposed breakthrough was catastrophic. Sailors were said to have suffered horrific fates, with some men found fused alive into the metal of the ship's deck and bulkheads. Others were said to have gone completely insane, while a few reportedly phased in and out of visibility, a condition that led to their permanent institutionalization. This entire terrifying narrative hinges on the testimony of a single man, Carl Meredith Allen. In the 1950s, Allen began sending letters to an astronomer and author, claiming he had witnessed the entire event from a nearby merchant ship. He provided vivid, disturbing details, but he consistently refused to testify under oath or provide any verifiable proof. Investigators soon found that Allen was a deeply unreliable source with a history of fabricating stories. The United States Navy has repeatedly and categorically denied that any such experiment ever took place. They point to the ship's own logbooks, which show the Eldridge was not even in Philadelphia on the date in question, but was stationed in New York and then on a convoy journey to Bermuda. So how did such a fantastical story take root and flourish? The most plausible explanation points to a simple case of misunderstood technology. During the war, the Navy did indeed use a process called degaussing on its ships. This involved wrapping a ship's hull with electrical cables to create a magnetic field that would counter the vessel's own magnetism, making it virtually invisible to the magnetic triggers of enemy mines. To an observer with no knowledge of the science, seeing a ship being prepared for degaussing might look like it was being wired for some kind of powerful energy field. Sailors' rumors about becoming invisible could have easily morphed over time into the legend we know today. The persistence of the Philadelphia experiment speaks to a deep public fascination with government secrecy and the potential horrors of fringe science. It is a perfect modern myth, blending the very real anxieties of the atomic age with the burgeoning genre of science fiction. It asks us what we are willing to believe about the limits of human knowledge and the hidden costs of technological progress. The story endures not because it is true, but because it serves as a powerful allegory for our fear that in the race to create the ultimate weapon, we might accidentally unravel the very fabric of reality itself. A military press release sent shockwaves across the nation in the summer of 1947. Near the small desert town of Roswell, New Mexico, an Army public information officer issued a startling statement to the local newspaper, announcing that the Army Air Forces had recovered a crashed flying disc from a nearby ranch. For a few brief hours, the United States government itself seemed to confirm that we were not alone in the universe. Then, just as quickly, the story was snatched away. A senior officer retracted the statement, claiming a grave mistake had been made. The object was not a flying disc at all, but the mundane wreckage of a common weather balloon. This abrupt about-face did not settle the matter. It ignited a firestorm of suspicion that would burn for decades, transforming a simple ranch into the epicenter of modern ufology. The rancher, William Brazel, had discovered the debris field scattered across his land, describing strange metallic scraps that could not be cut, burned, or scratched. He spoke of a material that resembled parchment yet had the strength of steel, and of slender, lightweight beams stamped with unusual, floral-looking symbols. The initial military retrieval team cordoned off the area, collecting every last piece and whisking it away to a secure base. Witnesses, both civilian and military, would later come forward with even more incredible claims. They spoke not just of strange wreckage, but of a second crash site, where a small, disc-shaped craft and its non-human occupants had been recovered. These accounts described the bodies as small, with large heads and oversized eyes, their remains allegedly transported to a top-secret government facility. For nearly 50 years, the United States government maintained its official position that nothing of significance had happened at Roswell. The story was dismissed as a combination of mistaken identity and overactive imaginations. Then, in the 1990s, responding to relentless public pressure and inquiries from a congressman, the United States Air Force released not one, but two separate reports aimed at finally putting the controversy to rest. They admitted the original weather balloon story was a cover-up, but not for an alien spacecraft. The real project they revealed was called Project Mogul. This was a highly classified endeavor involving long trains of high-altitude balloons equipped with sophisticated listening devices. Their purpose was to float along the edge of the upper atmosphere, attempting to detect sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. The strange, durable materials described by Brazel perfectly matched the components of these top-secret balloon arrays. The Air Force even addressed the alien bodies, suggesting they were likely anthropomorphic test dummies, used in high-altitude balloon experiments and dropped over the desert, their unusual appearance easily misinterpreted by witnesses years after the fact. For skeptics, this was the final, logical explanation. For believers, it was simply another layer of an elaborate government deception. Why change the story so dramatically decades later if the original cover-up was so simple? Why were some witnesses threatened into silence if all that was recovered was a balloon? The true power of the Roswell incident lies not in proving the existence of aliens, but in its perfect encapsulation of our deepest modern anxieties. It is a story about the immense, often secret power of the military-industrial complex and a profound distrust of official narratives. Roswell asks us who we are more willing to believe, the individual who claims to have seen something extraordinary, or the vast, impersonal institution that holds all the evidence and controls the story. It transformed the UFO from a simple sighting into a question of government transparency, making the empty New Mexico desert a permanent symbol of the unknown truths that might be hiding in plain sight. As the 20th century grappled with government cover-ups and alien conspiracies, a far older and more visceral mystery was unfolding in the heart of medieval Europe. In the sweltering July heat of 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. Her movements were frantic, compulsive, and she could not stop. She danced for hours, then for days, her feet bleeding, her body pushed to the brink of collapse. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her, their bodies writhing in the same uncontrollable frenzy. By the peak of the epidemic, as many as 400 people were caught in the grip of what history would call the dancing plague. The city council, desperate for a solution, initially believed the dancers simply needed to dance the fever out of their systems. They built wooden stages in the guild halls and town squares, hiring musicians and professional dancers to encourage the afflicted. This intervention proved catastrophically misguided. The constant stimulation and perceived permission to dance only fueled the mania, turning the public stages into arenas of pure exhaustion. People danced until their ribs broke from the strain, until they suffered strokes and heart attacks on their feet. Records from the time grimly note that as many as 15 people were dying every day from the sheer physical toll. This was not a celebration, it was a public health crisis of the most bizarre and terrifying kind. To understand why, we must look at the world these people inhabited. Strasbourg was a city on the brink. Several years of devastating harvest had led to severe famine. Widespread sickness, likely including syphilis and smallpox, was rampant. The poor faced extreme poverty, malnutrition, and a level of societal stress that is almost unimaginable today. Many historians and psychologists now point to this toxic cocktail of suffering as the trigger for a mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria. In this state, the intense psychological distress of a community manifests as physical symptoms spreading through social contagion. The dancing may have been a collective, unconscious breakdown, a somatic expression of sheer, unbearable despair. Another prominent theory points to a more tangible cause, ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, the staple grain of the region at the time. When ingested, it can cause powerful convulsions, spasms, crawling sensations on the skin, and vivid hallucinations. The symptoms of ergotism, known in the Middle Ages as St. Anthony's fire, bear a striking resemblance to the descriptions of the dancer's contortions. Yet this theory has its own complications. Would ergot poisoning have affected such a specific, large group of people in one city for such a sustained period? And would its primary symptom be coordinated, if frantic, dancing rather than the more typical violent seizures and gangrene? And of course, in a deeply super-religious society, many believed the plague was a curse, a divine punishment, or the work of a demonic possession sent by Saint Vitus, the saint invoked by those seeking a cure. The true explanation likely lies in a horrifying convergence of factors. Perhaps a few individuals, weakened by hunger and poisoned by tainted bread, began to convulse. In a city already vibrating with fear and religious fervor, Their desperate movements were misinterpreted not as an illness but as a compulsion. This belief then spread like a virus through the susceptible population, a perfect storm of biological trigger and psychological wildfire. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most unsettling puzzles. It is a stark reminder that the human mind is a powerful and fragile instrument, capable of translating collective trauma into a physical reality that can literally dance itself to death. It challenges our modern assumption that we can neatly separate the physical from the psychological, forcing us to wonder what other mysteries of the past might be locked within the enigmatic connection between a suffering society and the strange behaviors of the human body. The human body can be driven to a frenzy by unseen forces, but what of a mind so secretive it encodes its thoughts in a language that does not exist? Locked away in a vault at Yale University is a book that defies every attempt to be read. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, this 240-page codex is perhaps the most stubbornly mysterious object in the world. Its vellum pages are filled from edge to edge with a flowing, unknown script, a cipher that has resisted the greatest code-breaking minds for centuries. The text is accompanied by illustrations that are just as baffling. There are detailed drawings of plants that have never been identified by any botanist, their roots and leaves unlike anything found on Earth. Intricate astrological charts feature unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams. Perhaps most strangely, there are pages depicting plump, nude women bathing in interconnected, flowing tubes and pools of a vibrant green liquid. The manuscript's own history is a ghost story. Carbon dating places its creation in the early 15th century, somewhere in Europe. It then vanishes from the historical record for centuries, only to resurface in 1912, when a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich discovered it in a chest at a Jesuit college in Italy. He purchased it, and it has borne his name ever since, a trophy of the utterly incomprehensible. The very best cryptanalysts have thrown themselves at this puzzle and failed. Scholars from every conceivable field have pored over its characters. Even the brilliant codebreakers who cracked the German Enigma machine during World War II turned their skills to the Voynich, only to be completely defeated. They declared its structure unlike any known human language, a cipher with no apparent key. For decades, the leading theory was that it was an elaborate and brilliant hoax, perhaps created to defraud a wealthy patron. The recent arrival of artificial intelligence promised a final answer. In 2017, a researcher claimed that an AI system had identified the manuscript's language as a form of encoded Hebrew. The headlines proclaimed the mystery was solved, but the triumph was short-lived. Linguists quickly pointed out that the proposed translation made little coherent sense, producing garbled sentences about a farmer and his house. The AI had likely found statistical patterns, but not meaning. So what are we left with? Is it a lost language from a forgotten culture, its botanical and scientific knowledge forever out of reach? Could it be the work of an isolated scholar, a constructed language for recording esoteric alchemical secrets? Or does its otherworldly art point to something even more extraordinary, a message not meant for human minds? The Voynich Manuscript is a siren song for the curious. It offers the tantalizing promise of a secret, a truth hidden just beneath the surface of its beautiful, impenetrable script. It is a book that holds its silence, a centuries-old whisper that we can still not hear. A book written in an unbreakable code is a puzzle for the mind, but a community gripped by a collective nightmare is a mystery of the human spirit. In the bitter winter of 1692, in the small Puritan settlement of Salem Village, Massachusetts, two young girls began to behave in ways that defied all explanation. 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams, the daughter and niece of the local minister, were suddenly seized by violent fits. They contorted their bodies, threw objects across the room, and uttered strange, guttural sounds. A local doctor, finding no physical ailment, delivered a terrifying diagnosis. The girls, he declared, were under the influence of witchcraft. This single conclusion, born from a world where the supernatural was a daily reality, would ignite a firestorm of fear and accusation. The girls, pressed to name their tormentors, pointed their fingers at three women: Sarah Good, a destitute beggar; Sarah Osborne, a sickly elderly woman who rarely attended church; and Tituba, an enslaved woman from the Caribbean in the Paris household. These accusations unleashed a wave of hysteria that swept far beyond the minister's home. Soon, other young women in the village began to exhibit the same bizarre symptoms, their painful fits and trances seen as undeniable proof of an invisible demonic assault. The legal machinery of the colony began to turn, and the Salem Witch Trials had begun. The accusations flew fast and furious, fueled by the dramatic, spectral testimony of the afflicted girls. They claimed the accused witches sent their spirits to pinch, choke, and torment them. They spoke of a demonic book being signed, of secret meetings in the woods, and of a shadow world where the forces of Satan were actively recruiting for a war against God's people. The court, operating under the legal principle that spectral evidence was admissible, sent 19 people to the gallows. One man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. The terror only subsided when the accusers began targeting prominent, respected members of the community, including the governor's own wife. The colony's ministers finally intervened, and the use of spectral evidence was discredited, bringing the tragic episode to a halt. For centuries, the dominant explanation has been one of mass hysteria, a psychological contagion that exploited the rigid, paranoid atmosphere of Puritan life. But what triggered the initial physical fits? Modern science has proposed several compelling theories. One points again to ergot poisoning, the same fungus suspected in the dancing plague. Rye was a common crop in Salem, and the convulsions, hallucinations, and crawling skin sensations associated with ergotism match the girls' symptoms with chilling accuracy. Others have suggested an outbreak of encephalitis lethargica, a brain inflammation that can cause tremors, psychosis, and strange behavioral changes. There is also the simpler, more human explanation of petty vengeance and social pressure. Salem Village was a fractured community, riven by land disputes, family rivalries, and a deep-seated resentment between the poorer farming families and the more prosperous, commerce-focused Salem town. The witchcraft accusations became a weapon to settle old scores, eliminate enemies, and seize property. The afflicted girls, initially perhaps suffering from a real illness or simply seeking attention, found themselves at the center of a powerful drama they could no longer control. The true horror of Salem lies in its ambiguity. Was it a purely social phenomenon, a perfect storm of superstition and spite? Or was there a genuine, if misunderstood, medical or environmental trigger that made the accusers believe with every fiber of their being that they were under supernatural attack? The trials stand as a permanent warning about the dangers of fear and the fragility of justice, but they also remain an open question. They force us to wonder what we would see and what we would believe if we lived in a world where the devil was not just a metaphor, but a tangible presence hiding in the heart of your neighbor. While Salem grappled with invisible demons, a very tangible and bizarre object would appear on a scorched Florida property. In March of 1974, the Betz family was surveying the damage from a brush fire that had swept through their land on Fort George Island. Among the charred trees and ash, 21-year-old Terry Betz spotted something utterly out of place. It was a polished metallic sphere about 8 inches in diameter and perfectly smooth except for a thin, triangular emblem. It was heavy for its size, and it seemed entirely unremarkable at first. They took it home as a simple curiosity, a trinket to remember the fire by. But within 2 weeks, the sphere began to reveal its inexplicable nature. The family first noticed it when it started moving on its own. It would roll across the floor, seemingly with a purpose, and then stop. It even appeared to change direction, maneuvering around furniture as if guided by an invisible hand. Then came the sounds, a low-frequency humming that seemed to emanate from within the metallic orb. The most chilling interaction occurred when the family's son played his guitar in the same room. The sphere responded, emitting a distinct pulsating vibration, a resonant thrum that seemed to answer the music. It was as if the object was not just an object, but a device that could perceive and react to its environment. The story, once it reached the press, ignited a national media frenzy. Reporters and investigators descended on the Betz home, all hoping to witness the sphere's strange behavior for themselves. Under observation, the sphere did perform. It was documented rolling, stopping, and even emitting a faint humming sound. Scientists from the United States Navy and NASA were brought in to examine the object. Their analyses were thorough, but their conclusions were frustratingly divided. Some experts theorized it was simply a piece of industrial equipment, perhaps a ball valve from a high-pressure system that had survived a re-entry from space. They suggested its movements could be explained by subtle vibrations in the floor or imbalances in its construction. Yet other investigators were left baffled. They could not explain how a solid metal sphere could roll uphill, or how it seemed to react so specifically to sound and music. The sphere was even said to resist being moved at times, as if it possessed a will of its own. The mystery of the Betz sphere was never solved to anyone's satisfaction. It eventually vanished from the public eye, its whereabouts unknown, leaving behind only photographs and a thick file of conflicting reports. Was it a Soviet spy device, a listening instrument designed to gather intelligence, lost and then activated by chance? Could it have been a piece of an alien probe, a fragment of technology so advanced it appeared to be magic? Or was the entire episode an elaborate hoax, a clever manipulation of a curious object by a family seeking attention? The enduring power of this story lies in its physicality. Unlike a ghostly apparition or a distant light in the sky, this was something you could hold in your hands. It was a mystery that rolled across a living room floor, a silent, metallic enigma that responded to a guitar's chord. It forces us to wonder what we would do if an object of unknown origin and purpose simply appeared in our own lives, behaving in ways that defy every law we think we understand. The silence of a living room was broken by a rolling metal sphere, but a far larger and more public disturbance was once etched into the very landscape of the English countryside. On the morning of February 8, 1855, the people of Devon awoke to a world transformed overnight. A heavy snowfall had blanketed the region, and with the dawn came a discovery that plunged the community into a state of bewildered terror. Crisscrossing the fresh white powder was a single, continuous line of footprints. These were not the tracks of a man or a known animal. Each mark was a perfect cloven hoofprint, pressed deep into the snow as if made by a creature walking on two legs. The sheer impossibility of the trail was what caused true panic. These footprints were not confined to open fields or lanes. They were found scaling the steep roofs of houses, marching straight up vertical walls, and continuing uninterrupted across the tops of high haystacks. They appeared in enclosed courtyards with no gates opened, and they even marched directly up to and then away from the drain pipes of homes, as if the maker had passed straight through solid barriers. The trail stretched for over 100 miles from the River Exe to the town of Totnes, a single, relentless path that ignored every obstacle in its way. The local newspapers were soon filled with frantic accounts, and a name for the phenomenon was quickly agreed upon. These were the Devil's Footprints. In a deeply religious Victorian society, the conclusion seemed inescapable. Satan himself had taken a walk through Devon, and his path was a deliberate mockery of the natural world. The fear was so palpable that many residents refused to leave their homes after dark, and some clergymen were said to have blessed the thresholds where the prints were found. Of course, such a tangible mystery demanded rational answers. Over the years, a host of theories have been proposed. One of the most popular suggests the prints were made by a hopping rodent, like a field mouse or a wood mouse. As it hops through deep snow, its long tail can leave a straight line, while its landing can create a pair of marks that might be misinterpreted as a single cloven impression. Others have pointed to escaped experimental balloons from a nearby dockyard, trailing shackles or ropes that could have punched unusual marks into the snow as they drifted and bounced for miles. Another compelling idea involves a specific meteorological event, perhaps a rare heavy fall of snow rollers, where wind sculpts damp snow into cylindrical shapes, could have created a trail of collapsing donut-like rings as they tumbled across the countryside. Yet, each of these explanations struggles against the sheer, stubborn scale of the evidence. Could a single mouse or a bouncing balloon truly traverse 100 miles in a single night, scaling walls and appearing inside walled gardens? Would snow rollers form such a consistent, single-file trail of identical, hoof-like impressions over such a vast and varied distance? The rational theories feel like trying to fit a simple key into an impossibly complex lock. The devil's footprints endure in our collective memory, not because we believe the devil literally went for a stroll, but because the event represents a perfect, fleeting anomaly. It was a physical mystery that appeared one night and was washed away by the next thaw, leaving behind no physical evidence except for the eyewitness accounts and the drawings in the newspapers. It is a story that lives in the gap between what we know is possible and what was undeniably, if briefly, present. This bizarre trail forces us to ask what other inexplicable phenomena might have occurred throughout history, leaving no trace behind except for a story that sounds, even to our modern ears, just a little bit like a warning. A winged figure with burning red eyes stalked the skies of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Over 13 months in the mid-1960s, dozens of ordinary people reported terrifying encounters with a creature that would become an icon of American folklore, the Mothman. The descriptions were remarkably consistent. It was a tall, humanoid shape, often estimated at 7 feet tall, with massive wings that stretched 10 feet or more. But its most chilling feature was its eyes, two glowing red orbs set into its shoulders. Witnesses described the sheer, paralyzing terror they felt in its presence, a primal fear that went beyond the shock of seeing something unknown. This was not a silent phantom. Many accounts noted the sound of its wings, a loud, mechanical flapping unlike any bird. The creature was often reported as being incredibly fast, capable of keeping pace with a speeding car, flying alongside terrified drivers as they raced down lonely country roads. The phenomenon did not exist in a vacuum. The Mothman sightings were accompanied by a wave of other strange events. Unidentified flying objects were seen with increasing frequency in the area. Residents reported encounters with ominous figures in black suits, the so-called men in black, who would show up at witnesses' doors to intimidate them into silence. The small town of Point Pleasant was suddenly at the center of a full-blown paranormal crisis. It was author and investigator John Keel who wove these disparate threads into a single, terrifying tapestry. In his book, The Mothman Prophecies, he proposed that the creature was not an alien or a monster in the traditional sense. Instead, he theorized it was an ultra-terrestrial, a form of intelligent consciousness from a reality that coexists with our own. These beings, he suggested, feed on human energy, particularly fear, and their appearances are often harbingers of catastrophic events. The ultimate validation of this grim prophecy seemed to arrive on December 15, 1967. During the evening rush hour, the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed into the icy waters of the Ohio River. 46 people lost their lives in the tragedy. For many, the connection was undeniable. The Mothman had been a warning, a spectral omen of the disaster to come. The creature was never reliably sighted again after the bridge fell. Skeptics, of course, have a very different explanation. They point to the sandhill crane, a large bird native to the region with a reddish patch around its eyes. When seen in certain lights or by a startled witness, a crane could be misidentified as something far more monstrous. The psychological power of suggestion, they argue, then took over, creating a classic case of mass hysteria where one person's story fueled the next. Yet this rational theory struggles with the intensity and specificity of the first-hand accounts. Could a simple bird explain the glowing red eyes, the humanoid shape, and the profound supernatural dread that witnesses described? Could mass hysteria account for the coordinated appearances of UFOs and the men in black? The Mothman endures because it represents a collision between the modern world and ancient archetypal fears. It is the latest incarnation of the harbinger, the black dog, the banshee, a figure from folklore that appears to warn of death and disaster. The debate is not really about a bird. It is about the nature of coincidence and the terrifying possibility that the universe sometimes sends us a messenger, a dark, winged silhouette against the twilight sky, whose meaning we can only understand when it is already too late. Two men lay dead on a hillside in Rio de Janeiro, their bodies arranged in a scene that defied all logic. It was August of 1966 when police discovered the corpses of electronics technicians Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana. They were dressed in solemn, impermeable coats, and most bizarrely, each man wore a lead mask that covered his eyes. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible wounds, and no indication of what had ended their lives. The clues left behind only deepened the mystery. Beside them lay a small notebook containing cryptic instructions, empty water bottles, and a package holding two ordinary towels. The final haunting detail was a note instructing them to take capsules at a specific time and to protect themselves from radiation. What could have possibly brought these two rational, technically minded men to this remote hill, dressed for a scene from a science fiction nightmare? The leading theory suggests a tragic scientific experiment gone terribly wrong. As electronics experts, they might have been attempting to witness some high-energy phenomenon, perhaps believing the lead masks would shield them from harmful radiation or intense electrical fields. The cryptic notes could have been their experimental protocol. Did they ingest some substance, believing it would allow them to see spiritual energy or otherworldly dimensions, only to be felled by poison or a sudden, unforeseen physical reaction? The complete lack of any visible cause of death points to something internal, something that left no mark. Another compelling line of thought places their actions within the context of a spiritualist ritual. Brazil in the 1960s was a hotbed of esoteric beliefs, blending Afro-Brazilian traditions with spiritualism and early UFO contactee groups. The lead masks and protective coats could have been homemade gear for an attempt to contact extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, with the wearers believing the lead would protect their auras or block harmful energies during the encounter. The instructions in the notebook read like a ritual script, and the towels could have been intended for a ceremonial cleansing. Did they follow their instructions to the letter, only to encounter a force they could not comprehend, a force that simply stopped their hearts? The official investigation could never settle on a single answer. The autopsy revealed no toxins in their systems, and the cause of death was officially listed as unknown. Were they victims of their own curiosity, pioneers of a fringe science that cost them everything? Or were they participants in a secretive occult group carrying out a ritual that demanded the ultimate price? The lead masks case remains a cold, open file, a stark reminder that the line between science and the supernatural can sometimes vanish altogether, leaving behind only two men on a hill, their faces hidden from the world, guarding a secret they took to their graves. The rural isolation of a Bavarian farm can be a prison of its own making. In the spring of 1922, the Gruber family lived in such a place, a cluster of buildings called Hinterkaifeck, so remote it was nearly a world unto itself. The patriarch, Andreas Gruber, had recently told neighbors about a series of unsettling occurrences. He spoke of hearing footsteps moving in the attic when he knew no one was up there. He had found a strange newspaper on the property that no one in the household had purchased. Most troubling of all, the family's set of house keys had vanished without a trace. These were not just random annoyances, they were the subtle, creeping signs that someone or something was watching them, learning their routines and waiting. On the last day of March, all 6 inhabitants of the farm were summoned to the barn by an unknown person or a familiar ruse. There, each one was killed with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. The victims included Andreas, his wife Kazilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 young children, Kazilia and Joseph. Also murdered was the family's new maid, Maria, who had just arrived that very day, a fact that suggests her fate was sealed the moment she stepped onto the property. The true horror, however, began after the killings. For several days, the farm carried on a ghastly pantomime of life. Neighbors saw smoke rising from the chimney. The cattle in the barn were fed and cared for. Someone was living in the house, moving among the bodies of the dead, eating the family's food and sleeping in their beds. This was not a crime of fleeting passion. It was a cold, calculated act followed by a period of intimate occupation, as if the murderer needed to savor their victory or complete some unknown ritual. The case was never solved despite numerous suspects and theories. Was it a revenge killing by a disgruntled former farmhand, a secret affair that ended in a bloodbath? The police investigation was hampered by a sudden snowstorm that contaminated the crime scene and by the primitive forensic tools of the era. But the lack of a human culprit has allowed a more spectral explanation to take root in the story's legacy. The strange premonitions, the phantom footsteps, the missing keys that suggested an entity that did not need them to enter, all point to a malevolent, unseen presence. This was not merely a murderer hiding in the woods. It was a force that seemed to infiltrate the very consciousness of the home, understanding its rhythms so completely that it could seamlessly take over the duties of the living after extinguishing their lives. The lingering question is not just who killed the Gruber family, but what kind of consciousness could have lingered in that house for days, feeding the animals as if they were its own, while their true owners lay cold in the barn. The horror of Hinterkaifeck is the horror of the familiar turned alien, a reminder that the most profound evil might not announce itself with a scream, but with the soft, patient sound of footsteps in an empty attic. Deep in the frozen expanse of Russia's Ural Mountains, a mystery unfolded that would eclipse even the most deliberate of crimes. In February of 1959, a search party discovered the abandoned tent of a group of 9 experienced hikers, all young students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. The scene was one of utter chaos, but a chaos that made no sense. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, as if its occupants had fled in a desperate, panicked rush. Their belongings, including their warm boots and coats, were left neatly inside. The single set of footprints leading away from the tent told a story of people walking, not running, barefoot through snow that was dozens of degrees below zero. As the search widened, the bodies were found scattered across the snowy slope, some in small groups, others alone. The first victims were discovered near the remains of a small fire, dressed only in their underwear. But the true horror lay in the condition of the last 4 hikers to be found. These hikers had suffered catastrophic internal injuries with massive chest fractures and severe damage to their hearts. One young woman was missing her tongue. The most baffling aspect was the complete absence of any corresponding external wounds. It was as if they had been crushed by an immense, invisible force. The official Soviet investigation, conducted in secrecy, was ultimately closed with a conclusion that explained nothing. It stated the hikers had died from a compelling natural force. This vague, almost mythical verdict did nothing but fuel decades of speculation. Some point to secret military testing in the area, suggesting the hikers stumbled upon a weapons test and were killed by a concussive shockwave from a secret missile or a sonic weapon. Others propose a scientific phenomenon known as infrasound, low-frequency sound waves generated by the wind whipping over the mountain ridges. These inaudible vibrations can induce feelings of sheer terror and panic in humans, potentially explaining why the hikers would have ripped their way out of their tent and fled into certain death. Then there are the more outlandish theories, from attacks by the local Mansi people or a Yeti, to encounters with UFOs based on reports of strange orange spheres in the sky around that time. Yet, each theory hits a wall of logic. Why would infrasound cause such specific, brutal internal injuries? Why would a Yeti leave no tracks and not consume any of the victims? How could a military accident leave no trace of debris or radiation? The Dyatlov Pass incident endures because it is a perfect, frozen snapshot of the inexplicable. These were not naive tourists. They were skilled, hardy mountaineers trained for the harsh Soviet winter. Their very expertise is what makes their actions so profoundly unsettling. What force could have so completely overridden their survival instincts, driving them from the safety of their tent into a frozen wilderness, only to inflict upon them injuries that defy the known limits of physics? The case remains an open wound in the history of unsolved mysteries, a chilling reminder that nature, or something else entirely, can hold secrets far stranger than any fiction. A low, persistent drone can become a form of torture when no one else can hear it. This is the reality for a small percentage of people in places like Taos, New Mexico, who since the early 1990s have reported being plagued by what is known as the Taos hum. It is not a loud noise, but a relentless, low-frequency vibration, often compared to a distant diesel engine idling. For those who perceive it, the hum is an inescapable presence, a sound that permeates their homes, disrupts their sleep, and grates on their nerves, leading to chronic insomnia, anxiety, and migraines. The most isolating part is that the hum is highly selective. In any given town, only about 2% of the population can hear it, leaving the vast majority, including family and friends, to dismiss the sufferers as imagining things. Scientific investigations have been launched to find the source, but each potential answer only leads to more questions. Could it be industrial machinery from a distant factory, its low-frequency waves traveling for miles through the ground? Perhaps it is generated by massive geological forces, the slow grinding of tectonic plates, or the movement of magma deep underground, creating a seismic hum that only a few sensitive individuals can detect. Audiologists have proposed a form of low-frequency tinnitus, a unique neurological condition where the brain generates a sound that does not exist externally. Others suggest it could be a type of mass delusion, a psychosomatic phenomenon triggered by suggestion. Yet, for the hearers, the sound is undeniably real and physically palpable. This has led to more extraordinary theories to explain the maddening selectivity. Is the hum the result of a secret government project, perhaps an underground base or a new form of energy weapon whose emissions are accidentally leaking into the environment? Could it be a natural vibration from the Earth's own magnetic field or core, a fundamental frequency of the planet that only a handful of people are tuned to receive? The Taos hum represents a uniquely modern paranormal mystery. It is not a ghost you can see or a creature you can photograph. It is an invisible, inaudible enigma for most, and a daily, grinding reality for a few. It forces us to question the very nature of perception and reality, asking what other subtle forces might be constantly acting upon us, just below the threshold of our collective awareness. While a mysterious hum tormented a small town, a London family was besieged by a presence that left a stain on reality itself. In 1956, in the Battersea district, the Hitchings family began experiencing the classic signs of a poltergeist. Furniture moved, disembodied voices echoed through their home, and knocking sounds rattled the walls. But this case quickly deviated from the norm, introducing an element of visceral horror that most ghost stories lack. The entity, if that is what it was, began to excrete a foul, black sludge. This was not ordinary dirt or soot. Witnesses described it as a thick, tar-like substance with a revolting, sulfurous stench. It would materialize without warning, oozing down walls, pooling on ceilings, and dripping onto furniture. The family would wake up to find their home defiled by this inexplicable filth, a physical violation that was both disgusting and terrifying. Investigators from the Society for Psychical Research were baffled. How could such a substantial, malodorous substance appear so frequently inside a sealed home? They searched for logical sources, considering everything from a faulty chimney to a malicious prankster secretly entering the house. No rational cause could be found. The sludge seemed to manifest from the very air, a grotesque byproduct of the unseen force tormenting the family. This physical aspect of the case presents a profound challenge to skepticism. It is one thing to dismiss knocking sounds as house settling or voices as imagination, but it is another matter entirely to explain away a tangible, smelly substance that repeatedly coats the interior of a home. The sludge was evidence you could see and smell, a revolting anchor that tied the paranormal claims to a physical reality. This phenomenon, known as teleplasm or ectoplasm in older spiritualist writings, is rarely reported with such persistence and vileness. The Battersea sludge was not a wispy, theatrical vapor. It was a thick, sticky residue that felt intentionally vile, as if the entity was not just trying to scare the family, but to disgust them, to make their home uninhabitable through sheer filth. What kind of intelligence or what forgotten corner of physics could account for the spontaneous generation of a foul-smelling liquid? The case eventually faded, leaving behind a disturbing and unanswered question. It suggests that poltergeist phenomena might not always be about unseen energy, but about something with the capacity to cross a boundary, to leave a piece of itself behind in our world. The horror of Battersea is not just in the moving chairs or the phantom voices, but in the lingering, sticky feeling that something unclean had touched their lives, leaving a stain that was far more than spiritual. A different kind of stain was left on the city of Los Angeles in January of 1947. The body of a young woman named Elizabeth Short was discovered in a vacant lot, posed with a chilling theatricality that horrified the nation. Her case, known forever as the Black Dahlia murder, sits at a dark crossroads between a brutal, unsolved crime and a paranormal nightmare. The scene was one of calculated savagery. Her body had been severed cleanly in half at the waist, meticulously drained of blood, and washed so thoroughly that investigators found no useful evidence on her skin. Her face was disfigured by a gruesome Glasgow smile, a deep cut from the corners of her mouth to her ears, forcing a permanent, monstrous grin. This was not merely a killing. It was a display, a piece of grotesque theater staged for an audience of one. The police investigation was massive, generating countless suspects and even more confessions, yet no one was ever convicted. The sheer brutality of the act led to immediate whispers of something beyond a simple homicide. Rumors swirled of occult involvement, suggesting the killer possessed surgical knowledge and a ritualistic purpose, perhaps draining the blood for some dark ceremony. The case file became a labyrinth of dead ends and false leads, each one adding to the aura of profound evil that clung to the story. Elizabeth Short herself became a secondary character in her own tragedy, her identity overshadowed by the macabre nickname the press bestowed upon her. The Black Dahlia, a name evoking a rare dark flower, transformed her from a victim into an icon of true crime folklore. The enduring mystery lies not just in who committed the act, but in the why. What kind of mind could conceive of such a violation? And what did they hope to achieve by arranging the remains with such cold, deliberate precision? The case remains open, a cold file that has never lost its chill. It continues to haunt the public imagination because it represents a human evil so extreme it feels almost supernatural, a lingering shadow where crime and the macabre became permanently intertwined. A silent radio telescope in the farmlands of Ohio once heard a shout from the cosmos. On the night of August 15, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was performing its routine scan of the sky, listening for the faint whispers of the universe. Days later, astronomer Jerry Amon was reviewing the printed data, a long scroll of numbers and letters representing the intensity of the signals received. His eyes stopped on one particular sequence, a string of characters so unusual and so powerful that he circled it in red pen. The sequence read 6EQUJ5, and next to it, he wrote a single, emphatic word that would echo through history: wow. That one word gave a name to what many consider the most tantalizing signal ever detected in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The wow signal was remarkable for several specific reasons. It was a narrowband signal concentrated on one precise frequency, which is exactly what scientists predicted an artificial interstellar message would be. Natural cosmic objects like stars or nebulae typically emit a broad spectrum of radio noise, but this was a clean, sharp blast on a frequency that is naturally quiet, a channel reserved for listening to the hydrogen line of the universe. Its intensity was also extraordinary, bursting to 30 times the background noise before fading away. The entire event lasted for 72 seconds, the exact time it took for the Big Ear telescope to fix its gaze on that single point in space near the constellation Sagittarius, and then it was gone. For decades, astronomers have pointed every available instrument back toward that same patch of sky, listening intently for a repeat, for a confirmation, for anything. The silence has been absolute. No natural explanation has ever fully accounted for its unique properties. It could not have been a passing satellite or aircraft, as those are banned from broadcasting on that protected frequency. A reflection from space debris would not have produced such a clean, powerful, and one-time-only signature. Some have suggested a comet, but the specific comets proposed were not in that location at that time. The signal remains an enigma, a perfect candidate that arrived, announced itself with stunning clarity, and then retreated back into the infinite quiet. It stands as a ghost in the machine of cosmic exploration, a single, brilliant question mark etched onto a piece of computer paper. Was it a fleeting hello from a civilization countless light years away, a beacon that swept past our planet for one brief moment in 1977? Or was it a bizarre and still unknown natural phenomenon, a cosmic string being plucked just once in the void? The wow signal endures because it is the ultimate tease, a message we seemingly received but could never answer, a powerful reminder that we may have already been heard and are simply waiting, even now, for a reply that may never come. 3 men simply vanished from the edge of the world. In December of 1900, on the remote and storm-battered Flannan Isles off the coast of Scotland, a lighthouse stood silent. When the relief ship Hesperus finally made its scheduled landing after weeks of storm delays, the crew found a scene of profound and unsettling emptiness. The main gate to the compound was unlocked, and the heavy main door to the lighthouse itself was left ajar. Inside, the pendulum of the clock had stopped swinging. 2 of the 3 waterproof oilskins coats were missing, but the third remained on its hook, suggesting one keeper had left the lighthouse in a hurry without his vital protective gear. Upstairs, a cold meal of boiled eggs and porridge was set out on the table, untouched. The logbook had a final, mundane entry, and then nothing. The 3 experienced keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur, were gone without a trace. The official inquiry could only conclude that the men had been swept away by the sea while attending to equipment on the western landing platform, a theory supported by reports of storm damage found there. Yet this explanation feels incomplete, failing to account for all the eerie details. Why was the third coat left behind if they were all engaged in a dangerous, coordinated task? Why was the main door left open, a fundamental breach of lighthouse protocol, especially in such ferocious weather? The lack of any bodies or any definitive sign of struggle has allowed darker theories to flourish. Some suggest a violent fight broke out, perhaps over a minor grievance amplified by their extreme isolation, leading to a fatal struggle where all three men fell into the raging sea. Others whisper of more supernatural causes, from the hypnotic song of selkies luring them to their doom, to the sudden appearance of a sea serpent or even an otherworldly abduction. The power of this mystery lies in its stark simplicity and its absolute isolation. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse was not just a job site, it was a capsule of humanity in a vast, indifferent ocean. The disappearance of its keepers is a story told in negative space, defined not by what was there, but by what was absent. It asks us what could compel three rational, disciplined men to abandon their post, leaving behind every sign of interrupted routine, and step into a storm from which they would never return. For over a century, the silent lighthouse has stood as a monument to that single, unanswerable question. A sealed tomb can hold more than just treasure. In the autumn of 1922, as archaeologist Howard Carter broke through a doorway into the burial chamber of the boy King Tutankhamun, he unleashed a legend that would eclipse even the golden artifacts he found inside. The world was captivated by the dazzling discovery, but the celebration was soon overshadowed by a string of bizarre and untimely deaths that gave birth to the curse of the pharaohs. The most famous victim was Lord Carnarvon, the English aristocrat who had financed the dig. Just months after the tomb's official opening, he died in Cairo from an infected mosquito bite that led to blood poisoning and pneumonia. The legend insists that at the exact moment of his death, the lights across the city of Cairo mysteriously failed, plunging it into darkness, and back in England, his favorite dog reportedly let out a howl and dropped dead. The press seized upon these eerie coincidences, weaving a narrative of supernatural vengeance. The curse seemed to gather momentum as others connected to the excavation met strange fates. Carter's personal friend and member of the team, Arthur Mace, died from arsenic poisoning in the same hotel as Carnarvon. A radiologist who X-rayed the mummy allegedly succumbed to a mysterious illness. Carnarvon's half-brother died unexpectedly, and even a visitor to the tomb, George J. Good, passed away shortly after from a fever. With each new death, the legend of the curse grew more powerful and more terrifying. Skeptics, however, point to much more rational explanations. Modern science suggests that the ancient Egyptians may have unintentionally created a biological trap. After 3,000 years, the sealed tomb could have harbored dangerous molds and bacteria thriving on the organic materials left inside. Pathogens like Aspergillus, a toxic mold that can attack the lungs, or ancient spores of potentially fatal viruses, could have been inhaled by the first people to disturb the dusty, stagnant air. Lord Carnarvon was already in poor health, making him particularly vulnerable to such an attack. The media frenzy of the 1920s, hungry for a sensational story, ignored these mundane possibilities. Journalists like Arthur Weigall, who reportedly had a professional rivalry with Carter, helped popularize the curse, and the author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes and a noted spiritualist, publicly supported the supernatural interpretation. The curse was a perfect storm, a blend of tragic coincidence, burgeoning microbiology, and masterful storytelling. It asks us whether we are witnessing the wrath of the ancient gods or simply the predictable consequences of disturbing a sealed ecosystem. The true power of the curse lies not in its reality, but in its enduring appeal, a chilling reminder that some doors once opened can never be closed again. The silence of a sealed tomb gives way to the open skies of a Utah ranch where the unknown seems to congregate. In the 1990s, a remote property nestled in the Uinta Basin became the stage for a concentrated wave of phenomena so diverse it defies all classification. This is Skinwalker Ranch, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurs beyond recognition. The Sherman family, who owned the ranch at the time, reported a relentless assault of the bizarre. They described massive, wolf-like creatures with unnaturally thick hides that seemed impervious to bullets, staring at the house with an unnatural intelligence before vanishing into thin air. They witnessed unidentified flying objects, not just distant lights, but structured craft that performed impossible maneuvers. The property itself seemed to be alive with a malicious consciousness. Invisible objects would leave deep physical tracks in the mud. Poltergeist activity ran rampant, with tools disappearing only to reappear in plain sight days later. Cattle were found mutilated with surgical precision, their blood completely drained. This was not a single mystery, but a full-spectrum assault on the senses, a carnival of high strangeness where the rules of physics appeared to be optional. The intensity of the report soon attracted the attention of billionaire aerospace entrepreneur Robert Bigelow. His National Institute for Discovery Science purchased the ranch, launching a secretive, multi-year scientific investigation. His team of researchers, equipped with the latest technology, aimed to document and quantify the activity. They installed surveillance systems, took environmental readings, and logged hundreds of hours of observation. Yet, for all their efforts, the phenomena remained elusive and unpredictable. Equipment would fail at critical moments. Researchers reported feelings of being watched by an unseen presence, and some even claimed to have witnessed portals opening in the air, brief tears in the fabric of reality. The findings of Bigelow's team were never made public, adding a thick layer of modern secrecy to the ancient legends of the land. That legend is central to understanding the ranch's fearsome reputation. The Ute people, native to the region, have long spoken of the skinwalker, a malevolent witch or shaman with the power to shapeshift into animals. These entities are not mere ghosts, they are intelligent, predatory, and deeply tied to specific locations, said to bring curses and misfortune to those who disturb them. The activity on the ranch mirrors this folklore with unsettling precision, suggesting that the modern phenomena might be the latest manifestation of a very old terror. Is this a place where dimensions intersect, a natural weak point in reality that allows all manner of strange things to slip through? Or is it a location where human consciousness itself can somehow manifest its deepest fears into physical form? The true horror of Skinwalker Ranch is not any single creature or craft, but the overwhelming totality of the strangeness. It refuses to be pinned down to one explanation, challenging both scientific inquiry and paranormal belief with its chaotic, ever-changing nature. Even the most seasoned sailors speak of a place where compasses spin, and the sea itself seems to swallow men whole. This is the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, a vast triangular swath of ocean between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda. Its name evokes a sense of inevitable doom, a graveyard for ships and planes that ventured into its waters only to vanish without a trace. The most famous of these losses began on a routine afternoon in December of 1945. Flight 19, a squadron of 5 United States Navy Avenger bombers, took off from Fort Lauderdale on a standard training mission. The pilots were experienced, the weather was clear, and the flight plan was straightforward. But something went terribly wrong. The squadron leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, radioed in that his compasses were malfunctioning. He was lost, disoriented, reporting that the ocean did not look right. His final, chilling transmission was a declaration that they were entering white water and that they were completely lost. A massive sea and air search was launched, but not a single piece of wreckage or a single body from Flight 19 was ever found. Adding to the mystery, one of the search and rescue planes, a Martin Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13, also vanished that same day. Then there was the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a large tanker carrying molten sulfur. In February of 1963, it sent a routine radio message and was never heard from again. Only a few life preservers and a single life jacket were ever recovered. These stories and dozens of others built the Triangle's fearsome reputation as a place where vessels and their crews are simply erased from existence. Yet, when we look at the cold data, a different picture emerges. The area is one of the most heavily trafficked shipping lanes in the world. Statistically, when you account for the volume of sea and air traffic, the number of disappearances is not significantly higher than in any other similarly busy part of the ocean. The scientific explanations are both logical and compelling. The region is prone to sudden, violent storms that can form and vanish with little warning. The powerful, warm current of the Gulf Stream flows directly through it, capable of rapidly dispersing any wreckage and drowning evidence. Human error remains the most common factor, amplified by the fact that the Bermuda Triangle is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align, which can cause compass readings to be slightly off if not properly corrected. Perhaps the most fascinating theory involves vast reservoirs of methane hydrate trapped in the seabed. A sudden, large-scale release of this gas could theoretically bubble up to the surface, dramatically reducing the density of the water. A ship caught in such a plume would lose its buoyancy instantly and sink without warning. The released methane rising into the air could also create a highly turbulent atmosphere, potentially causing an aircraft's engines to stall or fail. So why does the myth persist with such ferocious power, even in the face of these rational answers? The Bermuda Triangle taps into a deep, primal fear of the unknown. It represents the ultimate loss of control, a place where our most advanced technology and our sharpest minds can be rendered useless. It is a blank space on the map where we can project our anxieties about the vast, indifferent power of nature. The story endures not because it is true, but because it serves as a modern-day sea monster, a cautionary tale that reminds us that for all our knowledge, the ocean still holds secrets we may never fully understand. A shadowy figure in a monk's cowl stands at the end of a quiet suburban hallway. This was the final, terrifying resident of the Pritchard family home in Pontefract, England, a presence so aggressive it would become known as one of Britain's most violent poltergeist cases. The activity began subtly in 1966, with the faint sound of breathing and pools of water appearing on the floor, but it soon escalated into a campaign of pure terror. The entity, which the family nicknamed Fred, was no mere ghost. It was a physical force. Family members reported being slapped, pushed, and choked by an invisible hand. The teenage daughter, Diane, was once dragged screaming up the staircase by her neck. Objects flew across rooms with violent force, and the chilling silhouette of a black hooded figure became a common sight, its presence heralded by a sudden, bone-chilling cold. What sets the Pontefract case apart is not just the family's testimony, but the sheer number of external witnesses who experienced the phenomena firsthand. Police officers stationed in the house witnessed heavy furniture moving on its own. A local journalist and a photographer documented objects levitating and doors slamming shut with immense force. Even a bishop who came to bless the home reported being targeted, with a wardrobe shaking violently as he prayed. This volume of credible, third-party testimony forces even the most hardened skeptic to pause. The hauntings seemed to be anchored in a grim local legend. Centuries before the Pritchard's house was built, the land was the site of a Cluniac monastery. Historical records show that in the 16th century, a monk from that monastery was found guilty of treason and hanged on the property. Could the violent energy of that public execution have left a permanent stain, a residual consciousness that festered for centuries before finding a new family to torment? Or was this a classic, if extreme, poltergeist case, a manifestation of psychic energy from an adolescent in the household, given form by the power of suggestion and local folklore? The debate continues because the evidence is so contradictory. The phenomena were witnessed by trained observers, yet they also followed the classic poltergeist pattern of centering on a young person. The Black Monk of Pontefract remains a benchmark, a case that pushes the idea of a haunting to its absolute limit. It asks us what we would believe if we saw a chair slide across the floor with our own eyes or felt an invisible hand close around our throat. This is not a story about a creak in the night. It is a story about a presence that fought back, a dark echo from a gallows that refused to be silent, leaving behind a legacy of fear that challenges the very border between our world and whatever may lie just beyond. These 25 stories form a tapestry woven from the threads of fear and fascination. From the silent decks of the Mary Celeste to the whispering walls of Enfield, from the cosmic fire of Tunguska to the silent scream of the wow signal, we have crossed centuries and continents in search of answers. And yet, the most compelling thread that binds them all is the absence of a final verdict. Each event exists in a state of perfect balance, a courtroom where belief and skepticism present equally compelling cases, and the jury remains permanently out. It is the very lack of definitive proof that gives these mysteries their immortality. They are not puzzles to be solved, but conversations to be continued, challenging our understanding of reality itself. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the depth of our imagination, so we turn the final question over to you. Which of these incredible events do you believe holds the most plausible paranormal explanation, and what piece of evidence sways you? Was it the intelligent cruelty of the Bell Witch, the calculated terror of Hinterkaifeck, or the cosmic coincidence of the Mothman? Share your own theories, your personal experiences, and your deepest convictions in the comments below. The search for answers is a journey we take together. Subscribe and join us as we continue to explore the world's greatest historical mysteries, where the past is never truly settled and the truth is always just out of